Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special conversation on the Legend Fiction Show. Today I'm joined by Jacqueline Luca. Hi, welcome back, Jacqueline, on the channel.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to come and chat about writing and all those good things.
Absolutely. We run an online fiction writing community, and then you run Adventures in Excellence. Is that right?
Yes.
And then, briefly, what is that for those who have not yet heard of you?
Yes, so Adventures in Excellence is an educational platform primarily for students 4th through 12th grade. And we look at composition. So we basically look at writing and literature classes. So I have a variety of composition courses, some creative writing courses, and then also literature courses where we really go deeper. We analyze good stories and we learn how to live a good story ourselves. So that's kind of Adventures in Excellence in a nutshell.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Okay, so for today, this conversation is on Middle Earth to modern day, the legacy of Tolkien and subcreation. Most of the people in our community know about Tolkien. Half of them love him. So this is a really fun topic because subcreation is something that fiction writing creators do. Now, before diving in, um, for those who don't yet know, this is a conversation for the upcoming convention that we host. It's every year, but this year it's upcoming. So Worlds Without End, Legend Haven 2023. Um, you actually were with us last year, Jacqueline. What was something you enjoyed, or what was a takeaway from last year that stood out to you?
Um, what I really loved last year was getting to meet people, and I felt like the way you set up community was really nice. I was able to have good conversations with people in the chat rooms that you had, and even just in the comment sections of these different talks that we were looking at. I was able to really connect with other writers and say, "Oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, this is something I've struggled with." I remember yeah, I think there was one with an interview with Mary Jessica Woods, and you were talking about world building and making things authentic. And I remember, really being able to connect with something like, on something like that with other writers, and I loved that. So honestly, the friendships that I made, as well as the amazing content, but the friendships I made kind of lasted throughout, well beyond that, and that was such a gift. So I'm so excited for another
Yeah,
year of
yeah,
it.
absolutely agree. The number of people that event personally introduced to me and that I made friends with over this past year, it's just been brilliant. It's just been wonderful. So we're actually trying something a little different this year compared to last year, where we separated the talks from
Mhm.
the actual day because everyone kept saying there's not enough time for us to just keep geeking out about the stuff that we love. And that was the number one complaint: not enough time for us to talk, even though the thing lasted a full day. So I decided, okay, we'll take all of the talks, we're going to drip them out ahead of time as a content countdown, and then on the actual day, it's all hangouts and meetups and workshops and sessions. And we ended up packing out the day all over again anyway, so people can choose where they spend their time. But now there's a lot more time to just keep chatting. So
Amazing.
glad you enjoyed last year. Can't wait to have you back for this year. And folks, if you haven't yet done it, I'm going to bring it up again later, but check the link in the description. There's two of them: Adventures in Excellence and then also Legend Haven. So, okay, let's talk about this. Middle Earth to modern day, the legacy of Tolkien and subcreation was a topic
Mhm.
you picked that interested you. Well, I want to ask you, what does subcreation mean in a moment? Um, but first, if you were to define the difference between Middle Earth and then modern day, and I think it's that difference that prompted Tolkien to write The Lord of the Rings and his whole legendarium. So, what do you think is that difference?
I think, well, there's a lot of ways to go with this, but I think one of the things that Tolkien kind of uses Middle Earth is a era gone by. So we have this idea of a simpler world, and there's a sense that there's not as much machinery or mechanical things, and we see a lot in his works. Anytime somebody's clever with their hands in a mechanical sense, they're making machines or bombs or anything like that, they're
Yeah,
instantly the villains. And I think this was coming off of his experiences in World War I. And so we had this
Goblincraft.
kind of simpler time, this more ancient era where things were, yeah, just a little different than our modern age that's full of technology, things like that.
Hmm.
That would be a big piece of things. I also think in his kind of mission, I guess, to create a myth for England, to create something that was really rich. That Middle Earth is kind of that foundation piece for that, where it's much more mythical, I guess you could say, that the creatures are magical. And I don't think he intended us to not have that in modern times, but I think it's more hidden, maybe.
Yeah,
So I
we've
think he's
lost a lot of it.
hmm?
We've lost a lot of it with our
Yeah,
attempt to be so modern and so on. We've lost this sense of
yeah,
myth.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
So then, piggybacking off of that, then what is subcreation? Because what he's just done is he's created something, but he's gifted us a particular word. And if people haven't yet read the article that he or the post that he wrote on this, what is it called, and what is subcreation?
Ooh, subcreation. So I'll answer what subcreation his idea is. It's the creator, like a smaller creator under the bigger creator. So it's this idea that there's one kind of overarching creator, God, and then we are the smaller creators underneath that. And he talks a lot about it being our right, and he talks a
Hmm.
lot about it kind of being something that's really good for us to do in as we're made in the image of God, also creating in that image of God. I've seen him reference the subcreation piece, I think, in Mythopoeia, and then also I think on fairy stories he talks on that a little bit as well. So those
Okay.
are really beautiful, yeah, things
Yeah.
to go to.
Why is it important? So we know a little bit what it is. Why does he call it a right? Why is it something important?
Oh, I think that's really good. I think it's important that we don't think that we are, because we make up these worlds, we don't think that we're all powerful, and I think that's a piece of it. We're not, we aren't God, even if we are creating worlds like God did in a certain sense. I think he liked keeping that perspective of, oh, I'm a sub creator, I'm not the main one. And I think that's really important. And then I think in addition to that, I think it's a right coming out of the fact that we are made in the image of God. So I think it's kind of
Hmm.
this not just, maybe he would not maybe say just right, but also just something really beautiful that will help us become more who we're supposed to be, actually, through that. God loves creating things, and there's this joy that comes with creation. There's this, you create something and God saw it was good, and he was, there's an excitement there. There's a beauty
Hmm.
there. There's a goodness there. And I think
Hmm.
that when we're able to share in that beauty and that goodness, as authors, creating worlds ourselves, there's something really right about that. So it's kind of a right, and it's something a good as well. It's something really
Yeah, yeah.
wonderful for us to do. So
What I like about that a lot, that level, that kind of thinking, is that this is one way in which, as we cultivate the craft of creating fiction, of sub creating, we can also start to get insights or intuitions into how God relates to creation. So,
yeah.
in the same way that when we look at an imaginary world that we've invented or characters we're working on, we love them because we know them from the inside out, not from the outside in. And we end up, because we know them so intimately, we intuit them internally, and then we sort of layer on why they're cool and then how to be able to communicate them with other people. That is how God relates to creation. And what it ends up being important from a theological and then from a spiritual level is to then realize God relates to creation from the inside out. He doesn't have it sitting all in a big glass marble in heaven's court, and he looks down at all of the universe and all of creation like it's separate from him. That's
Mm,
not how he works. He's like fully immersed, and he participates, and he's involved in everything. And I'll let the theologians handle it, you know, how that's actually articulated. But he's, as Scripture tells us, closer to us than we are to ourselves, which is such a
yeah.
weird thing to think of.
Hmm.
So when we are subcreating, we're directly copying, we're mimicking, we're imitating his creative ability to dream something and then for it to take on a life of its own, because we gifted that freedom. And so creation is not an easy thing. It's a messy thing. It's not a tame thing. And look at our world. We're proving it. And he's gifted us that freedom. And you go and you write characters, and they do not do what you want them to do. Same
Yes.
sort of thing. Okay, so we're talking about subcreation, and it's the, if I could say why it's also valuable, it's because, um, especially if you're in the fiction space, you're
Mm,
teaching yourself to not just perceive an object. You're teaching yourself to look inside something, to look deep into things, to understand what's the meaning of the thing. Um,
mhm.
and we do that through allegory. We do that through imagination, through intuition, through combining, and it's that level of thinking that spirit world, angels, God looks at things, because matter then comes later, comes after. First comes the intention, comes the purpose, comes the dream for the thing. And then when we are subcreating, we're doing the same sort of thing. We're learning to not just look at the matter of a situation and the physics of a thing, but what's the purpose? What's the point? Why is it lovable? Why is it a problem? And it's out of that that we get a story. So whereas a lot of modern day tells us you're basically a meat bag that doesn't matter, a subcreative, faith-inspired view would be like, well, yes, the meat bag is part of this, but I am a lot more than that. So we need to look a lot deeper. We're a mystic meat bag, and that's actually really important too. So
Very much so.
yeah, don't quote me, people. That's a terrible turn of phrase. So, what would you say then is Tolkien's legacy? What would you say is his greatest contribution then? And there's, I'm sure, all kinds. What would you mind if you were to pick one?
It's like, oh yes. I mean,
Turn up the heat on the hot seat right there.
I was like, so much. What is Tolkien's legacy? There, maybe I'll focus just like three pieces. In that, I think one of the things his legacy that he's given us that's really cool is him being the father of modern fantasy, seeing like kind of this spiritual realm piece of things, these kind of components, mythical or magical components we can't see or fully fathom, and bringing that into fantasy. That's one of the big things he did for the genre, just kind of making it its own genre. When beforehand we had myth and we had real stories, and he really helped develop a genre called fantasy and created that for the rest of us. So that's obviously huge. I love writing fantasy, so it's very important to me that he did that. I think also as a faith-based writer, for me anyways, he's had a huge impact because he's shown us how you can write a story that doesn't say, oh, and then he loved God and then he did this. It's not obvious, but it changes hearts. And I love reading his books because they make me better people, like a better person. Like and they make my students better people, I feel like, when we're going through these stories, because he just captures something true and good and beautiful. And I think that that's part of his legacy. He shows us how to write books that don't have to be explicitly Catholic, maybe, or explicitly any particular thing, but his richness is there anyways. And I think that that's a huge part of his legacy. And then, yeah, to kind of bring it back to subcreation, this idea of subcreator, of the messiness of art, but just the importance of it and the beauty of writing and the beauty of being a part of something, I think is really, really good. His idea of we create under the big creator, and that informs how we create, that informs why we create. And that's part of his legacy that he's left to us that I think is really important to hold on to keep that purpose, to keep that, I don't know, that dignity almost of creating as well. It's not just us sitting down, and it's not even just in some ways just self-expression, like, oh, I'm moody and I want to create a moody character. It's that we're a part of a bigger picture, and I think that's really important. So
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. And one of the things I'm hearing in this is what we're doing is we're also participating in divine creativity, because God did not just wind up the universe and then pop humans in it and then say, go figure it out, y'all. Instead, he's calling us to cooperate with him and then to participate in the whole process and with him and with each other to make all of this happen. And so one of the things that's just been mind-blowing to look at the impact Tolkien has had, you even have, I have no idea if, what's the name of the director? Peter Jackson. I have no idea if he's even Christian or what his faith background is, but he took a mythical story that was not even overtly, religious, and he told a myth, and it boiled the world, and it blew us away, and it's defined a generation, and it's been a high watermark for fantastic fantasy storytelling, and we're all trying to be like that, and that sense right there of, like you say, the dignity of us as creators. I just got an email the other day from someone who joined the mailing list, and she's saying something like, I really grapple with the wondering if I'm wasting my time with this whole subcreation thing, if I should be doing this at all, or if I should be doing more important things. And I'm thinking, no, maybe for the first 10 years of your journey in this, you're just going to write fun stuff and silly stuff, and maybe you don't share it. And maybe you're going to try really hard and do a bunch of things, and maybe share them with a couple of friends, and maybe self-publish them. the what's more important is that you feel called to enter into subcreation. And like from what you're saying, out the gate, this is not just a silly, imaginative little thing. This can actually be a very important skill or virtue to be cultivating. So if you're called to do this, then parents and need to be encouraging their kids like, whoa, little Johnny or Mary is like really liking this whole thing of like
Mhm.
effect. What are you doing? Active contemplation with your thinking.
Yeah.
Like writing is it's a serious discipline. And so what are you doing if you think about that on a spiritual level, not just a psychological level? You're participating in the creative genius that God uses when he goes about creating the universe. That's not a little thing, and I think that's ultimately Tolkien's whole point, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like the idea too, like it's not a little thing and it's not even an individual thing in some ways, right? It's we're a part of, especially when we're talking about legacy. His writing impacts our writing, and who knows what future writers need your struggle, your works,
There you
and you
go.
become a part of a huge. I always like saying we're not just solo singing, kind of by ourselves in the dark. We're actually a part of a
Yeah.
huge choir, and we need to
Yes.
connect to that. And I think
Right.
that that's just I don't know. I love that sense of
Yeah.
we're part of a big story, and we need to play our part. And writing your little story down might not feel like you're changing the world, but it might, and you won't know until you do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Um, one of the dangers whenever we start talking about Tolkien is everyone thinks, oh, I'm never going to be as great as him. Or we think, I have to be as great as him or it's not even worth trying. And it's like, no, you don't have to put that kind of pressure on yourself. You might just create just for the fun of it. You have, at the same time, no idea how something in the future, will pan out. And if your fun creative project, it might just be that. And maybe that's all it needs to be because it's for you and it was something you worked through, and maybe there's a couple of people out there who need it. I love the image of this one little boy, for example, who's recuperating in hospital and it's midnight and he's in pain, and then he finds this novel and then he forgets all of his pain and he keeps reading all night long because the novel changes him and it changes who he is for a while, and maybe it changes his life because the author thought something deep and beautiful and serious. And um, don't try to be Tolkien, be you. You may have your own contribution. And I think it's just so important. Don't put pressure on your your work to be the next incredible thing. Just allow it to be what it is and just keep writing. That's the whole point, is don't just keep writing. So
Yes.
um, speak into that. And then I want to ask you, where then do we find subcreation and how you're seeing it in Tolkien?
Okay. Well, maybe I'll just jump right into
Okay, go
the
ahead.
sub creation. I love that part of things. Where I see sub creation most clearly is in the Silmarillion. So this is where there's I actually have some of the Silmarillion right here, but I love
I love that
where it
book.
starts with there was Uru, the one, and he's kind of creating this melody, this song here, and he creates all of these, the Valar and the Maiar, and then they actually go out and they create quite a bit of stuff as well. And so right there off the bat, we kind of have these creatures that look a lot to us like I think maybe Greek gods or Norse gods
Definitely.
especially, where they
Yeah.
have this kind of deified role in his world. But then also, I think what we get is sub creators there. Like it just shows us
Definitely.
really clearly
They're
exactly
doing
how
it
he
too.
pictures this. Yeah, that's where I see the most clearly.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I loved about that first chapter is if you want to understand a lot of how the ancient world looked at how the gods and the All Father and man and how creation kind of works. The chain of being was a medieval theme, or Jacob's ladder, as Father Bulgakov I think refers to it. It's this idea that there's the divine, there's God who implants the dream, who then fractals or fragments his infinite creativity into all of these individual intelligences
Mm,
and persons, and he calls them to then use all of their genius and creativity to then make that happen. And so then they
mhm,
fractal themselves into multiple layers and layers all the way down till we get to matter, and then start recombining that together to make humans. And then humans have their own job to, in the same way, collaborate with each other and participate in this massive chain of being. This again, to use the theme of Jacob's ladder, it's this sense of the angel descending and ascending constantly between the source, between God, and between whatever the lowest thing might be in creation. So that sense of they're subcreating, borrowing the first miracle that he
mm,
granted, and then working with that and making everything that we see.
mm. I love that. I think that's so beautiful. This idea, like we all have these like the fragments. I love that picture of the imagery of I don't know this kind of sharing in the fragments, but having something really real and true
Mm-hmm.
there to work with. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
beautiful.
And what's so beautiful about that is, um, it re-enriches, and there's another word, not enriches, enchants. It re-enchants
Mm,
creation. And you and I have talked about this in the past with a past conversation, where we've lost a lot. And again, like this, the whole modern idea of there's God, there's an all father, there's a superordinate spirit or whatever, and then there's
yeah.
like nothing in between, or maybe there's angels, but we don't know what they're actually doing. And then there's us, and we've lost the plot, and it's basically a ball of rock, and um, we're all going to die, and we don't know what it's all for. So yeah,
No.
this is that's the modern view.
Hmm.
Whereas you read the opening chapter of the Silmarillion, and I really
Yes.
think there's a level at which, a deep level within the human being, we read this and we think, oh gosh, I wish this was true, because I think we can intuit it is true. And then when we go and we read the mystics and the saints, they're like, oh yeah, this is far closer to how reality actually works.
I love this a lot. It reminds me of something that Tolkien said in on fairy stories, where he talks about how we have. I think it was this quote where he says, "We have rivers that run with wine, so that for 1 second we can turn and see that rivers won't run with water." And there's a sense of, wow, that sounds so magical. Whatever we can think of, flying people or rivers that run with wine or whatever we can think of, then that kind of it helps us turn and say, oh my goodness, but we actually do have a
Mm-hmm.
river that runs with water, just how magical that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it helps us, yeah, totally re-enchants the world, helps us see things from a new perspective, and helps us hopefully, if it's done right, see even a little deeper into things that we might not be able to see on the surface.
Right.
Like the courage of even the courage of Samwise Gamgee, where we're able to see something a little deeper, some truths there that inspire us and help
Mm-hmm.
us bring that into our own lives there. So,
Yeah, yep, definitely. There's Chesterton obviously was a big influence on Tolkien, and I don't actually know if they met each other. I'm assuming they did, but I remember the one little description, like you say, the rivers of water. We imagine them as wine, just so that we can remember. Oh yeah, water actually is really cool and actually really important. Chesterton tells the story of somebody who wanted to walk. What was it? I think all the way around the planet to come back and rediscover his home and
yeah,
enjoy the unique joy of rediscovering something familiar for the first time or something like that. And not
that's
everybody
lovely.
can go out on a big adventure and do that. And so that we do that with fiction. So basically you sit down in one place and, okay, let me totally switch out my mental framework and let me switch out all of my associations with everything so that I can, like the knight in Alice in Wonderland, turn myself upside down and look at the world from a completely new way. Because I think this is also the difference between Middle Earth versus modern day. Um,
Mhm.
we've gotten very used to looking at things from a singular perspective, and
Mhm.
outside of our culture, people do not have these same perspectives. And then even as you cultivate a greater and a more intentional humanity, your perspective also changes. So it's like reframing, right? Fiction is something that does that to us constantly. It's trying to, and we end up really loving the stories and the movies that do that really well. Um, but that sense of, are you sure that what you see is what's actually there, or what you think is there? And it's more of I'm going to say the mystic that wants to sit in front of a thing and then ask it to reveal itself. because it recognizes if God is present in
Mhm.
everything and his angels are collaborating and participating in things with him, then I have something that I can learn from everything. And then you understand, oh, this is why the Desert Fathers ran out into the desert, or
Mhm.
why St. Francis and the mystics would run away into the forests, because everything is alive and filled with the glory of God. Um, and that's why Tolkien is just brilliant, because his world is that kind of world, and that's why we love it. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. I agree.
in connecting this then to the theme of worlds without end, did you have any thoughts on that front?
Ooh, I think one of the things I saw is that theme of legacy, like us taking Tolkien's legacy, using that in our work, and then giving that legacy um, to the next generation of writers, or the next to the next. I think I thought of that idea of worlds without end. And part of this is our abundant creativity. As sub creators, we're just going to keep creating worlds, and that's beautiful. But I think part of the worlds without end is also us, like I said earlier, being part of that choir, like understanding that um, the impact that others can have on us, and the impact that our voice can have on others. And I love your story of that one boy in the hospital room who reads the story and who's changed by it. And wouldn't that be merit enough to write a story, even if we know like it's going to touch one person, and that person might be us? But I just think there's something really beautiful there. And so, worlds without end, what a beautiful phrase to keep in mind while you're writing, and realizing, yeah, this world you're creating, or even this, if you're not writing fantasy and you're just showing your glimpse of our modern world,
Mm-hmm.
what that might do for the future, what legacy you might leave to the world. So that's
Yeah.
world at that end.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And there's a quote from his article on fairy stories where he talks about something as simple as a hill, right? Not everybody reads the word "he climbed a hill," and not everybody thinks of exactly the same hill. Everybody is
Mhm.
going to paint a picture of the hill that they saw, or that they saw growing up with. Or when someone describes a forest, someone who lives in Alaska versus someone who lives in the Gobi Desert is going to have a very different feeling or image of what a forest or a desert is going to be, which then means how the world that they generate to understand how the story flows and happens is very different. There can be two very different worlds, right? Because we introduce a lot of who we are into a thing. So, in that sense, there's this beautiful value of a world without end. And that's why we sit together and to learn from each other, because very often these different associations can create different insights. And that's also why there's a point at which we can't have complete control over our story. There's a point at which we describe it and then we share it, and then other people come back and tell us they love it because of this reason. Like, I didn't. That was not my. It's in there because that's what I. So they end up generating like a different world that has deep, deep meaning for them. Um,
Yeah.
I like your point about the transition and the translation. With the whole choir, because there's a phrase, I think it's from the Holy Father Pope Francis, where he was canonizing some saints a couple of years back, and he had this beautiful phrase which I've loved, where he talks about the saints in every generation are missions from God, to that time,
Mm,
right? To that
yes.
people. Their message may or may not be valuable to the people who come after or before, because it was meant for who they were and where they were then. Um, so that then also then means, he's also gone on to say, our job in every generation is one of translation. We're always taking what we loved before and then just translating it into the myths and the stories and the tropes and the ways that people live and talk and the things that we know of now. So
Mhm.
we're always translating, which means any given story can be reimagined and needs to be reimagined over and over and over again, because this is the beautiful thing about God. He is infinity. And so it's going to take every single human being alive forever, plus every single angel alive ever, to try to describe or begin to describe him. And that's why Worlds Without End was such a cool, way to go about this, because not only is every single one of us an aspect of God, an insight into God, um, but we can also sit within ourselves and imagine 50 different universes on a good Tuesday inside ourselves. And what are we doing? We're subcreating, we're borrowing and recombining Why? So that we can see something a little more clearly. And we need to create this arena or this story situation so that we can understand something more clearly. Um, and it just never ends, which is which is our delight. And this is, I love this line from scripture. What is it? It's the glory of God is, what is it? To hide things, and it is the glory of man to seek out and discover them. Something like that.
Mm.
Which means it's our job forever to be discovering what God has had to share through every other human life and person and idea. So it doesn't end, and that's awesome. Um, Thanks for coming on, Jacqueline. How can people connect with you if they want to follow your podcast and learn more about what you're doing and learn more about your education program?
Awesome. Yeah. So if you want to connect, if people want to connect with me, I love making friends on Instagram at Jacqueline Rose Gold. That's probably where I update things the most about my writing journey, my thoughts on books as well. You'll get a lot of that. Adventuresinexcellence.com is the best place to find more about the writing and literature classes. Yeah, what a joy to have, that kind of job of just talking about things like that. And then, yeah, I do have a podcast called Magic in the Ordinary. And that is all about just seeking truth and beauty and goodness in little ways in everyday life. And we talk about all kinds of things on there. So it's a blast.
Awesome. So, friends, check the link in the description to subscribe to that, to check out what she's doing. And then hit the second link to head on over to Legend Haven and join us. Jacqueline intends to be there during the con, so you can hang out with her live and chat with her and, just have fun with all of us together. So, check the links in the description. We hope to see you there. Thanks again, everybody. And for those who are writers, keep writing. And if you're a reader, keep reading. God bless.